We're live. What's happening, everybody? Everybody's having a fantastic, whatever day it is that you're watching this. Doing a bit of a quick show tonight. I'm going to be jumping back in the shop, doing a little bit of work to the car, playing around with it. So instead of yammering about V8 stuff and all of that, let's talk a little bit about this new Inline 6, the new GME T6 HO, which is getting a lot of news, and the GME T6 SO, the standard performance engine, standard output, and then you've got the HO, which is the high output. So let's walk some of this through. Want to talk about this engine, what it can mean for the brand of Ram, what it can mean potentially for the brand of, well, Challenger, Charger, and the like for the new platform, and really see where this thing shapes out. Is it as good as they hope it will be? And what kind of stumbling blocks have engines like this had to achieve in the past? So let's dive right into it. First of all, GME T6, global medium engine turbo 6-cylinder. High output. Have you guys seen this yet? Have you seen the output figures? 500 plus horsepower for the high output. 475 pound-feet of torque for the high output. For the standard output, 400 horsepower with 475 pound-feet of torque. These numbers, at least the horsepower numbers, are probably vaguely familiar to you, with the T6HO basically putting out the same output as the 6.4 liter. The standard output is putting out the same horsepower as the outgoing truck 5.7 at 400, but that's right, 475 pound-feet of torque to come along with it. At least that's what they're advertising. So both engines making a ton of torque, with the HO throwing in 500 horsepower to boot. Those are massive numbers from a 3-liter V6. In fact, they're vaguely familiar if you're used to the Giulia V6, that Ferrari-derived 500 horsepower 3-liter, I believe, 2 and whatever liter. It doesn't matter. It's still a 500 horsepower engine, but it doesn't make the torque that the 3-liter makes. Getting into the performance envelope of these engines, 400 or 500 horsepower in stock form, is making other engines blush in the community. What does a 2.7 liter make? Question mark. What does the 3.5 liter EcoBoost make? Done gone up and forgot those numbers because I never looked into them, because I'm not interested in them. If I were to buy a truck, I'd have gotten a 5-liter because those horsepower and torque numbers aren't 500. Certainly may not even be close to 400. And again, that is in stock form. A 3-liter twin turbo making 500 horsepower or 400 horsepower is a fantastic kickoff spot. So let's go through the specs a little bit. The HO has got a 9.5 to 1 compression ratio and 26 pounds of boost. The standard output is going to be 10 and change for compression ratio. So a bit of a bump in compression ratio helps with making torque, and 22 pounds of boost. That's right, folks. You've got Fast and the Furious levels of boost going into these things to make that kind of power. The HO is going to require 93 octane, or at least premium 91 octane, with the standard output recommending but not requiring those types of octane. In other words, you can, if you want, run the high octane in the standard output, but it is mandatory for the high output, with, I am going to assume, significantly lower power numbers if you choose to run a different octane. Sounds fantastic, but is it? See, this is where, for me, I start to question a few things, and I start to look back in history a little bit, and I start to look at engines like the 3.5 liter EcoBoost that Ford introduced. And I start to think of all of the problems that came with that engine, all of the recalls. In essence, owners feeling like they were beta testing that engine. Lots of people were pissed. And it's probably the reason why the 5-liter is so popular in the Ford trucks, aside from the fact that they scream. But the reality is that the 3.5-liter EcoBoost has had a lot of teething problems and some, if I'm being honest, very hacky dealer fixes, should I say, prescribed fixes by Ford themselves for the dealers to perform to keep those engines running properly. By the way, the new 3-liter V6 is direct injected, so get away with that maybe with an engine that's always under boost. Which leads me to another question. So if this thing's twin turbo, it's making on at least an advertised, talking about the HO here, 26 pounds of boost, the SO 22 pounds of boost. Chances are that engine is going to be in boost all the time. And for an engine that's going to be in boost all the time, it's going to have a very robust intercooling system. Obviously, fuel system is going to have to be up to par to fuel this thing all the time, which is to say that, is this engine going to be any better from a fuel economy point of view? See, this is one of those weird things that a lot of times folks don't consider. Is this just innovation for innovation's sake? A whole lot of time, effort, and energy went into developing the new GME T6. But the problem that I see is the same problem that I see with the Ford EcoBoost family of engines. Let's not forget, we've got a lot of playbook to read from here. 2-liter, 2.3, 2.7, 3.5. My experience with the EcoBoost engines has been that they're fantastic engines, wildly powerful for their size, all things considered, especially for their time, right? But the reality is that they don't get that great a fuel economy. If your foot is always in the throttle to get the thing moving and the engine is always under boost, there's only so much you can do before you have to really start digging into power enrichment mode, or at least getting a significantly richer fuel-air mixture. Well, that was my experience playing around with EcoBoost cars, basically rental cars, stuff that I would drive when I would go out of town. Putting around, I suppose they were okay. Highway cruise, fairly decent. But the second you started tipping into the throttle, turbos spool up, fuel economy goes into the toilet. They're fun to drive that way, though, and I never got anywhere near advertised fuel economy with those engines. Just saying. Not to mention, let's get back to the idea of development costs. Again, these are fairly advanced engines. Basically, they are variable cam timing, direct injected, twin turbo, 3-liter, inline 6 cylinders. Going to be very smooth running. Everybody in the aftermarket is licking their chops to get a hold of this bad boy, whether it's the standard or the high output. Standard would be pretty nasty because it's got a higher compression ratio. It's where that same torque number is coming from. But again, I'm getting sidetracked. Where could have that money have been spent? Could we have potentially had a better 6.4 liter or a better 5.7 liter instead of the GME T6? Think of it like this. The existing technology is already known to get pretty decent fuel economy going down the street, with the 5.7 regularly knocking down 22, 21 miles per gallon with a full-size tradesman truck that I drive. 6.4 liter in the cars and even in some of the SUVs will knock down just a point or two less than that, again, in highway conditions. Is the T6 going to be any better? That's the question, because it would have to be significantly better to justify the development cost that went into it. Whereas maybe a redeveloped or a re-envisioned V8 could get even better fuel economy than the T6. especially when you take into consideration the wide performance envelope and driving styles that people will put these vehicles through. I have a feeling, and I think a lot of people may share my sentiment in this, that the GME T6, whether it's HO or SO, is basically being thrown out there to game the system through CAFE standards. See, the way that this works is this. The CAFE standards have a standardized test that they put these engines through. And when you have a standardized test and you know what the answer is supposed to be, then you can engineer things to basically, again, game the system and knock down really good fuel economy numbers within a very narrow band of testing criteria. And then outside of that, it doesn't matter. You're in power and rich mode, so that doesn't matter. That's when you're making all of your power. And you're in, just a cruise mode, so that fulfills your actual fuel economy run, whether it's, within a certain mile per hour range. In that respect, the 3-liter can work really well. And guys, keep in mind, it only takes about 30 to 40 horsepower to cruise down the freeway at freeway speeds with about 130 to 150 pound-feet of torque, depending on coefficient of drag. The 3-liter can do that outside of boost. But the idea is the second you roll into the throttle, you're into boost territory. And if you ever have any experience looking into data logs, the air fuel or fuel air actually on the Mopar side equivalent ratio is usually not going to go into hard power enrichment mode, even with significant manifold pressures. So you can, in other words, you can still get away with putting the thing into boost without really showering down on the fuel. But the second load gets anywhere near anything that you would consider to be, when we're talking about acceleration rate, noticeable, that 3-liter is going to be deep into a power enrichment mode well before the V8 will be. Not to mention the V8 will just have lower cylinder pressures. More cylinders, bigger cylinders don't generate near as much power to make, or generate the same amount of cylinder pressure to make the same amount of power. So I guess what I'm saying is I feel like it would have been better, potentially, a lot of people are looking at it the same way that I do, that maybe a different V8 would have been better. A little bit more technology put into the V8. Maybe that would have been better. Or maybe a different design of V8. See, the Hemi itself isn't necessarily bad, but it's kind of suffering from some flaws just from a airflow point of view. A wedge head, especially nowadays, can flow every bit as much as the Hemi can. LS3 will answer that pretty quickly, so will LS7. But if you want to have a set of heads that flows crazy, but a wedge head is also going to be more thermodynamically effective, or efficient, I should say, whereas a Hemi just basically won't be as efficient. Flame fronts, things like that start to come into play when you have a combustion chamber of that shape. I guess what I'm saying is this. I'm stoked about the 3-liter inline 6. I've said it before. I'm hoping to get my hands on one in one way, shape, or form, whether it's standard output or high output. Believe me when I tell you, it will be an aftermarket's paradise with these things, with these engines basically being a corporate engine in a twin turbo inline 6 form. That is a major advantage over any V8 right now. But I'm very concerned about what that means as far as development. We're talking about development earlier. I'm worried that we're going to be beta testing the engines the way that, buyers were beta testing the 3.5-liter EcoBoost. Now the 2.3 came out, it worked pretty well, but the 2.7, that also did well. But it had to, because all of those engines fell well after the 3.5-liter debacles. And I say Z because it's multiple. So yeah, hopefully Dodge gets their act right. I'm hoping that we don't have tons of recalls, TSBs for days. It looks to be built like a tank, by the way. Steel rod, steel crank. I believe it even has forged pistons. It's basically a how to build a nasty power plant. It's got boost already to the tune of 26 pounds for the HO and 22 for the SO, standard output versus high output. Can't say that it's not built for boost, right? Anyway, let me get to you guys real quick. Dad's Garage, thank you very much. Saying thanks for the help today. Looking forward to testing and providing feedback to you. Thank you very much. Dad's is going to get out there with some Toyo 888s. Really good tires. I've heard a lot of good things about them. I see them on the backs of cars at the drag strip quite a bit. The guys that run them tend to really like them. Kind of silly looking from a tread pattern point of view, but lots of tread on the ground. And again, handling characteristics of those tires, from what I've been told from the guys with sports cars that drive them, are actually really good. So I have a feeling you're really going to like them. So let me know how you like them. Thank you for that feedback, buddy. And very thankful for that super chat, buddy. Thank you very much. Mark, I'll check in with you guys and we'll get back to the chat. Mark is in. Michael Corleone with the flex. I like it. Nitro Crew has got it in, saying, sup, B, got the 2 flexins. Lee's in saying, hope they built for longevity at these power levels. There's a lot of folks that are questioning that as well. Michael Grove saying, hey, Dr. Mason, what's up, Michael? Roy is in saying, what up, Mr. B, what up? Dean Rebello. Got it down. Ball guy with the shades and the flex. I like it. So you can even make Mason, always on point with the best content. Thank you, brother. Hear me dad saying might make a nice minivan engine. Sure enough, it would. Lee saying only when you baby it, otherwise gulp, gulp. Talking about that fuel economy. Yep. Andy saying I have a 3.5 liter EcoBoost in my Explorer. If you're in boost all the time, you will be filling up all the time. My Hellcat's getting better mileage. And again, thanks, Dad's Garage. So, Anthony is kind of ringing or saying the same things that I was saying about that engine. My experience with them, and again, I don't live with one, but I have had them as rental cars at several different times. And man, you could almost watch that needle drop over to E. But man, they at least the 2.3 liter runs really good. 2.3 is pretty fun. Mike G saying, what's happening, everybody? Maybe Dad saying it might be fun to put them all in Wrangler. Okay. So here's the thing. The 3 liter opens itself up to modification in a way that the Hemi doesn't, because it's an inline 6. It also could, because it's going to be a corporate engine, lend itself to transplants really well. The thing is that the stigma about 6 cylinders is gone. Those that are in the know that a well-sorted 6 cylinder, obviously high boost turbo combination, usually it's easy to fit in the car. Cooling requirements aren't nearly as bad as the larger engine, especially cruise idle conditions. It's easy to work on because it's all kind of right there, or at least presumably it's easy. We don't know all the details yet as far as configurations. Is the manifold part of the cylinder head? And there's a lot of things that are going to come out of this. In other words, does it share an architecture that looks like the original latest gen Supra, or does it have a new Supra style, normal style manifold? If you guys haven't ever seen the I forget, B20, whatever it is. Anyway, it only has 2. Anyway, just look it up when you get a chance. It's nuts. But what can we expect from this thing in terms of modability? Bro, it's a freaking inline 6 with twin turbos from the factory. Steel rods with a steel crank. It is begging for more boost. This thing at about 35 pounds of boost, running on corn with all of the tricks and tips. I mean, the thing already has boost, right? But it's turbo. With everything you could probably potentially do to this engine, if the block will handle it, it's going into trucks. I'm pretty sure they're building it very robustly. I'm sure it'll be a fully skirted block with a, 50, bolts per, main bearing. It's just going to be, it should be what we're looking for. But the problem is, will it really be? So anyway, let me finish getting with you guys. We'll get back into it. Luke's saying, or how we are beta testing the Grand Wagoneer. I know, right? Luke's saying, what's going to be, Mason? In recent times, I bought an '08 Toyota Tacoma 4-liter V6. I've got true dual Flowmaster Super 44s and a Spectre cold air intake. Should I run a Magnuson supercharger? Yeah, I mean, if they make a kit for it, why not? Magnies are fun for those combinations. Let's see. Oh, Roy's saying he had a 4-liter Ranger. I had a 4-liter in my Splash. Really wish I wouldn't have sold that or gotten rid of that truck. My G saying, quick question. Anybody know what exact NGK spark plugs to use on a 2019 5.7 LZFR5 CI11? It might be a 5, might be 5 or a 6. But either one should work fine. But I think the stock equivalent is the 6 heat range, not the 5. Could be wrong about that though. All the 6.4 stuff is 6 heat range. You know what? Those might be a 5. Eric saying, good evening, Professor Mason. Good evening. I always have to look that stuff up, man. It's one of those things where you just never. There's some things I'll always kind of remember and I know what I'm working with. But for me, it's like, is it a 5? Is it a 6? It's like, I don't know. What's the stock one? Just grab the stock plugs. Work great for basically every application you can come up with. If you're going to blower, go 7 heat range on those though, for sure. BM's in saying, hey, B Mason, I was the one talking about the cat overtemp problem in my 21 Hellcat. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, thank you for that. My buddy just got a 21 as well, and he did the same at the track yesterday. Fell on its face at the end of the track. Yep. I'm saying he can run better than 115 miles an hour. The 21s and later are doomed with the cat overtemp lowered settings. This is going to catch a lot of people with the summer coming. Well, it can for sure. I've seen them actually crack high cat temperatures during the winter under high load conditions because you're making more power. But yeah, that 1700 degree number is kind of crazy. I was really surprised by that. But yeah, that's that. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are loading those cars heavily with higher temps and they haven't run into a problem. I have a feeling it just degrades the actual catalytic converter biscuits maybe a little bit faster with the higher temps. I'm not sure, but yeah, that sucks if that's the case. BM saying he traded out mine 3 days ago into a 21 ZL1. Good car, by the way. The ZL1 is growing on me daily, it seems like. I wouldn't trade my car for one, but I get it. They are growing on me. So getting back to this, the GME T6 alphabet soup, the HO or the SO. I'm hoping that we're not going to be beta testing this thing. I'm hoping that it's going to be robust right out of the gate. They're being built in the same plant as the current generation Hemis in Salino, Mexico. So that's pretty cool. And we're just going to have to see where this all shakes loose. I have a very strong feeling, though, that once these things start getting out into the wild, so to speak, I have a feeling that the aftermarket is going to clamor to these pretty quickly, and it's not going to be too long before you start seeing 400 and 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, and then some coming out of these cars with stock turbos. Aftermarket turbos, fuel systems, and whatever else they're going to start putting into it. And with that operating system getting cracked probably much sooner than later, you'll see these trucks out there running around, basically running their asses off. And they're going to be a lot of fun in the process. But that's really not while we're here, is it? I mean, it's cool that we're talking about this engine in the trucks. And don't forget that the Hemi started off as a truck engine too. It was a truck engine well before it was a car engine. So when's it going in a car? What car is it going to go in? Well, based on how the thing looks, I don't know if there really is enough room in an LX platform lengthwise for the inline six to get in there. You could probably get away with a V6, but an inline six, well, even at 3 liters, it might be a bit of a tight fit. But in the new platform, or in a new platform, that engine would be absolutely superb. Could you imagine getting your hands on, well, let's say a Scat Pack version of whatever the new platform's going to be with a HO T6 under the hood, and with all of the options seemingly begging to throw themselves at that car? Pretty sweet deal if you think about it. And the architecture is not unfamiliar. It's a 3-liter inline six. Seen that before. Dual overhead cam, variable camshaft, check. Yep. Twin turbo, oh yeah, we know about that. 4 valves per cylinder, bingo. What's unfamiliar, aftermarket? See, this is where things start to get a little bit odd. You're starting out with a 3-liter, making 26 pounds of boost, 500 horsepower. Sounds like it should be basically cakewalk to make this thing fast. Especially from a, what the hell is that? Especially from the point of view of the fact that it's all very familiar architecture. How many 3-liter inline sixes are there? Especially 3-liter inline sixes that are making that kind of power. And again, the HO, well, hell, even the standard output engine will make some or a lot of the other inline sixes blush by comparison in terms of power output. Now, granted, they may not be making as much boost, but this is 22 or 26 pounds of boost going into a heavy ass truck. You want to talk about cylinder pressures, dwell at pressure. This is some crazy stuff. So I'm intrigued. I'm interested. A little bit pensive, but I just can't wait to see what they can do with that combination, that platform, if you will, that engine platform, in something that is going to be lightweight. And oh, let's talk weight of this engine too. Something we haven't really gotten around to just yet. Although weight hasn't been reported, at least not that I'm aware of, it's a 3-liter inline six, all aluminum, by the way. Think about that for a minute. Does that mean that we've got a 500 horsepower engine in a combination that could yield itself maybe 80 pounds, 90 pounds lighter than the 5.7 liter Hemi? You got to remember that the intake manifold weighs nothing on that engine. It's got aluminum heads, but it does have an iron block. 3-liter inline six aluminum block. You'd say it might be smaller, but there's going to be, or lighter rather, but there's going to be a lot of webbing in that block. There's going to be a lot of reinforcement in that block so it can handle that kind of power. And the only way you can make a block handle power is with mass. Obviously, there's some design stuff that is thrown in there, but it's the mass of material to hold all that cylinder pressure, to keep from deformation and things like that. So I'm going to say the same amount of material in terms of cubic material, but I'm going to say that it's going to be a significant amount lighter, probably 100 pounds lighter. Cylinder heads, complicated stuff up there. You got some turbos that can be heavy. The thing is, I'm going to say it's probably going to be 100 pounds lighter than the outgoing engine, making the same amount of horsepower as the 6.4, the same amount of torque as the 6.4, arguably more horsepower, but you get the idea. We're talking in generalities here. Potentially 25 more horsepower than the 6.4, the same horsepower as the outgoing 5.7 liter, but with 75 pound-feet more torque. So you got to remember that the existing truck engine with the variable runner intake manifold is basically, for purposes of conversation, a 400 horse, 400 pound-foot of torque truck. This thing is going to make 475 foot-pounds of torque. That is a significant jump over the 5.7 liter and in a lighter engine to boot, presumably. So we've got a lighter engine making significantly more power across the board with about a 6,000 RPM red line to play with too, by the way, with 90% of its torque being available before 2,400 RPM, at least for the HO, and presumably the same for the standard output. Again, with the standard output having a significantly higher compression ratio, but running less boost. Starting to look interesting. On paper, this looks fantastic. But will it be in practice? And again, I'm reminded of the EcoBoost engines and all of the issues that came with the 3.5. And again, if you don't remember some of those issues, well, you'd be forgiven to not remember because there were so many issues. Intercoolers, condensation issues within intercoolers. There were block-offs and all kinds of miscellaneous WTFs, which would be better described, or TSBs, which would be better described as WTFs, I should say, going into making that thing work. So, to get it to the point that we're at today, I'm pretty sure that Dodge has been able to learn from some of those mistakes. Enough time has come and gone, and I'm sure that Dodge has had a fleet of Ford trucks deconstructing that thing and learning from Ford's mistakes. Ford was first to this party with the EcoBoost. And let's not forget that the current Raptor runs the EcoBoost. The Ford GT runs the EcoBoost. And so you've got a pedigree of at least some hot rods that are running around out there with significantly well engineered and tested, durability tested, especially with that Raptor and the GT too. So there's that to look forward to in terms of, V6 type of architecture. But it's not just the architecture, it's all the issues that can come from intercooler inefficiencies, exhaust inefficiencies, issues with direct injection, and all of the things that come with that. I'm pretty sure that those problems have been fairly well vetted at this point. But again, you'd have thought the same thing about the EcoBoost when they were being released. And, well, look at what all happened with that. Anyway, let me check back in with you guys. Oh, Mike's saying he was considering just getting the OEM plugs, but the employee discount is juicy on the NGK. Just wanted to make sure I was getting the equivalent. The catalog isn't the most detail focused. Yeah, a 5 or a 6 heat range, I don't think you'd have a problem with. I wouldn't think anyway. I'd prefer to see a 6 in it, but a 5 shouldn't be bad either. Cody saying, I feel like it's going to be the return of the SRT6 badge. Funny you should say that because last night at the drag strip, yep, there was an SRT6 there. I'm not sure what it ran. I need to go back. I took some pictures of the car though. For you guys to know, I've always had a bit of a crush on the SRT6, and there was one there, so I was kind of fanboying a little bit. Brando's asking, you said the Camaro and Mustang were sports cars and not muscle cars. Correct. Why do they compete with the Challenger? Because there's nothing else in the lineup for Dodge to compare it to. One of the things that gets overlooked is the fact that the Camaro, its entire life, has tried to be more Mustang than Mustang. It's always been a little bit more of the, more engine in the same platform versus maybe different suspension or innovation through the Ford camp. Challenger was never a sports car. The Challenger was a direct line of sight competitor to the Mercury Cougar. in trim and in the size of the thing. It was just always a big car. The Cuda being just a slightly smaller variant of the Challenger. So even from way back then, from 1970, 71, 2, 3, 4, what have you, as long as there was a Challenger, or as long as there was a Cougar Eliminator, so to speak, there was going to be a Challenger to go head to head with it. So it really was a bit more of a muscle car in the size and the packaging than the Mustang. Now, everybody will argue that, well, what about the 71, 2, 3, whatever Mustang Mach 1's, that body style? The only reason why big blocks, that body, by the way, was put together specifically to more easily accommodate big blocks. But the big block era was gone when that car was being released. So you had engines like the Boss 351 that kind of bridged that gap. Some will say it was even better than having a big block in the car to begin with anyway, but I digress. Those were the cars that were basically competing with each other. Again, you wouldn't ever consider that car a true sports car the way that you would consider like a 1966 Mustang Fastback a very sporty car. So when you're talking muscle car or sports car, pony car, really more to the point, it's very difficult to define. I mean, you used to say, well, what about road racing? Well, the Mustang, the Javelin, the AMX, the Camaro, the Challenger TA, the Cuda AAR, the Cougar, the Cougar Eliminator. I'm trying to think off the top of my head here. That's 8 marks. Those were all cars that raced in the heyday of SCCA road racing. So they all were racing in the same race series, but that wasn't drag racing. That was road racing. And so they were all kind of in the mix. So you had these personal luxury hot rod e-body sized cars, which would be the Challenger and the Challenger and the Cuda, but also again, Cougar Eliminator, Cougar size, basically size cars, also racing alongside of Mustangs and AMXs and those same types of cars. So, is it a sports car? I mean, I understand why you would call it a sports car because it's kind of hard to call it something different, but is it a muscle car? It's more muscle than it is sports car. In other words, a muscle car, the handling is not on the top of the list of things that you've engineered into the car. The engine, the size of the engine, the big engine, torque, immediate torque response, that is what defines or can define a muscle car. If that trait is put before other traits, then it's a muscle car. Ergo, Challenger and Charger for that matter. Today, if handling and going around corners is more high on the list, then cars like the Mustang and Camaro would fall into that sporting or sports car place on the spectrum. Brandon's also asking, why would they raise the power on the Scat Pack? They should raise it to at least 550 horsepower, but how? See, the problem is that the 392 has already got an fantastic camshaft, fantastic intake manifold, although I would argue that it needs help and that it could be redesigned to be a little bit better. You'd pick up a little bit of power there. But it's already 11-to-1 compression ratio. The heads are second to none. The exhaust system is fantastic. It's making a ton of power for 6.4 liters in a 2-valve configuration. And 2 valves, well, in terms of packaging, if that engine were a 4-valve, it'd be kind of tough to get it into the car. Oh, wait, no, it wouldn't be, because the M156, which I had in my E-Class, was, well, in the same platform that these cars are built on. M156 is a 4-valve, 6.2 liter, making 500 horsepower. Actually, technically 507. So why didn't they go that route? Well, a lot of it has to do with cost. Packaging you can get away with, for the most part. But the cost is what kills you on that deal. So They already had the platform, they already had the architecture, and the thing was already making, as close as it doesn't make a difference, roughly 500 horsepower to the flywheel. To get any more power out of the thing would require a different intake manifold and a different camshaft, which would probably set them back a pretty decent chunk of change in terms of development, and getting that thing a EO, which is an executive order, basically just means it's CARB compliant. In other words, emissions testing. Shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? Well, the big deal is the emissions themselves. They get big engines making big power, make big emissions problems for manufacturers. And so because of that, any development that would have gone into the 392, well, it's a lot easier to put that development money elsewhere, especially when, well, there wasn't any competition for it. Still isn't, by the way. I want you to think about this. The 392 with a camshaft that's got a lobe separation that's practically flat. The thing's got a super wide LSA, which means it's not going to respond very well to long tube headers. At least not where it counts on the big end making horsepower. The thing is, it's making 475 odd horsepower. Well, this is in a world where the Camaro is making 455. The Mustang was making 435, 455, 465, whatever it was, it's making more horsepower than all of them. Makes more torque, especially down low, by a vast margin. Now you can say, well, yeah, but if you put a cam in an LS, LT, what have you, it's easier, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, kind of, but it comes with a less than 6.4 liter cam from the factory. Yeah, they pick up a lot because the cam that's in them, frankly, sucks. So, yeah, when you have something that sucks already, when you put something that's good in it, yeah, it's going to wake it up quite a bit. It's one of the reasons why Mopars don't just come alive and freak out when you put a camshaft in them. It's because the cam that's in them is actually, aside from the wide lobe separation angle, pretty decent. In fact, make an argument that if you tighten up the LSA and throw just a little bit more duration at that cam, pick up power all over the place, which is what my cams do. It makes the car act like it's got another 30 cubic inches. But all that aside, that's the reason why. Now, the 6.4, kind of a bit of a trivia for you. The 6.4, the way that it sits now, wasn't the original design for the intake manifold, is what I'm talking about. There was a plan to run an intake manifold that looked a lot like the 6.1 manifold, slightly smaller, shorter runners, larger diameter, at least potentially larger diameter, or the same diameter runner, but shorter, kind of a pancake version of that 6.1. That engine, if I remember correctly, that test mule made about 507, 115, something like that horsepower, but it just did not have anywhere near the torque response that the variable runner intake manifold had. So some other things, drivability can come into that as well. Now, the argument could be, well, why not just throw more cubic inches at it, right? I mean, build the 426. Well, I suppose you could, but then you run into that damn pesky problem of executive order and CARB compliance and all this other stuff. And in a world where that amount of R&D, that amount of money going into that engine, well, why would you? Because for the amount of money that you would sink into it, you've already got an engine that's making 700 plus horsepower. And the Hellcat, it's already been emissions complianted. You don't have to have any money into that. If you want to go faster, if you want more than 475, 500-ish horsepower. I'm saying 500-ish because the new operating system cars are actually pretty good, 19 to 21 cars anyway. So when you think of it from that point of view, it kind of does make sense why they didn't really put a whole lot into the 6.4. It's a shame that they didn't, at least for like the 1320 model. I was real critical of Dodge not doing anything with that engine or for that car with a different engine, or at least a different gear set or something. But all that being said, that's why they didn't. It's because they didn't have to. Oh, Hemi had saying he was watching some of the horsepower wars in Orlando on YouTube. Oh, sweet. Heavy Mopar representation, lots of good racing. Very cool. Oh, Cody's saying his issues that these things weigh as much as an apartment building. Yeah, well, the thing about it is, yeah, they're heavy, but they're also big cars, and that's part of it. I mean, you can fit a Mustang or a Camaro inside the body shell easily of a Challenger, much less a Charger. But they're also built extreme with a lot of durability in mind. And I've seen these Dodges take, the whole misuse and abuse that could, in some cases, render a Mustang or a Camaro inoperable. I've seen Dodges take it and not have any issues. They're heavy as a tank, but they're built like a tank. And yeah, they do have the aerodynamic coefficient of drag of your basic backyard shed. But man, when you got a lot of engine, you don't need a lot of aerodynamics. And again, they're built with a different frame of mind in place. And look, I'm at the drag strip a lot. I see a lot of these cars going down the drag strip, Mustangs, Camaros, lots of NA stuff going down the drag strip, especially 6.4 cars. And you're definitely not showing up to a fight unarmed, so to speak. If you're rolling out there with a Scatty, it's going to get the job done, especially at a drag strip on a prep track on a tire. Camaros and Mustangs might be able to out-roll race them, but they ain't going to catch them on a dig, especially on a prep track. That's a lot to ask, stock for stock, anyway. Oh, Hemi saying, I bet it won't sound as good as my Hemi. I know, right? Oh, we'll say if it's similar to a BMW i6, it will be great. Roy's saying, no, I'm talking about how it sounds. Randy's in, checking in from Middle Tennessee. What's up, man? Sovereign Knights in. What's up, buddy? Roy's checking in with the fellas. Cody's saying, I feel it would make sense if the Challenger having an inline engine, considering it started life as one, so it'd come full circle. Yeah, kind of true. And the thing is, look, guys, it's weird because the whole aversion to inline sixes, or the weird issue against six cylinders, which presumably kind of does come from an inline point of view, is kind of only an American thing. I mean, you look across the board, overseas, they love inline sixes. BMW, huge inline six, from a performance standpoint. Australia's actually had a Hemi 6-cylinder inline six. A lot of people don't realize that, but yeah, they had one available to them down there, and make some pretty dang good power out of that thing too. You've got the Jaguars and all this other stuff that had inline sixes that were iconic engines, and it's weird that. The V8 sounds good, and it does make a lot of power, and they're typically large displacement engines. You can fit a large amount of displacement in a V configuration into a space. That's why they're so popular. And again, they make a lot of power, and they sound great. But, no replacement for boost when it comes to making power, especially these days. Let's see. Luke saying, my Tacoma has 236,000 miles. Would it hurt the engine to supercharge it with the current mileage? Also, thoughts on the 2022 Tundra 3.5-liter V6 having problems with the wastegate sticking. I don't know anything about that, but I can tell you that at 230 odd thousand miles, I'm not worried about the engine in terms of supercharging, because I've seen engines with 250,000 miles that were very well maintained, and you wouldn't know that they had 250,000 miles on them at all. I've seen engines with 50,000 miles that looked like they needed to be scrapped immediately and replaced. So your situation is going to dictate the fitness of that engine for a supercharger. But for the most part, modern engines are not really taxed that hard. And I would look more at your transmission than your engine being able to manage that level of power at this stage of the game. The engine probably not going to be a problem, but I just don't know the condition of the engine, so it's kind of hard to tell. Sovereign saying you won't even look at a Camaro. Wide body Challenger. Yeah, they're nice looking, man. That is true. Oh, him saying he used to have a crush on the SRT 4s. Yeah, I've always loved those cars. They're a lot of fun. Oh, Sovereign saying the 70 Challenger offered a touch of luxury with some muscle. Very, very true. And again, it was coming into the 70s back then. It was just a different mentality with the cars getting bigger so that they could house bigger engines. And there was a touch of luxury. There was a touch of upscaling with those cars. You got to remember, there was never a Dodge Mustang type car. There was never that small V8 powered contraption. It was always, there was, don't get me wrong, the early 273 and the Barracuda. I get all of that. Arguably, the Barracuda was the first pony car, if you will, that it was released before the Mustang. Just the Mustang got all the pub because people went nuts over it. And some are saying muscle is power, and it's not an athlete; it's a bodybuilder. That's it. It's a Dodge Challenger with muscle head on the beach. Yep. Sovereign's loving him some 6'4". Gary's saying, hey, B, I have a tap. By the way, pollen down here is driving my allergies nuts. Gary's having problems with a dual pump setup. Said it's all of a sudden has 35 psi. Any idea what the problem is? Chances are you had a pump fail. I've seen that happen with dual pump setups before. So check that and make sure. Also, make sure that you don't have any issues with wiring or the plumbing of the hoses going into the pumps themselves. But I have seen pumps fail. In fact, Racer X's car had a pump failing that he had to replace on his car. And, you only know that through data logging. So, usually when you see an issue like that, it's a failed pump. Now, it could potentially be, well, no, because if it's getting power, it's going to be sending fuel up. That means probably not a voltage issue, but check voltage to those pumps too and make sure that you don't have a voltage dump for some reason. Let's see. So 45 putties of tire spinning goodness. Fun. Tune a 392 to 500 horsepower. Well, if you're talking about to the wheels, it's going to take a little bit more than that, but you can definitely tune them up. You'll pick up 15, 18 to the wheels, depending on the state of tune the car's in. Oh, Cody's saying explains why I saw a video of a 392 with long tubes lose to a 392 and then taking exhaust. So the funny thing about long tubes back in the day is you would put long tubes on the car and you would see as the power curve starts to flatten out with the shorties. The long tubes might have been just maybe a tad rare for them to be much higher at all, frankly, anywhere near peak horsepower than the shorties. But they would come up and they would nose over more sharply. So, yeah, that was something that we would see on the dyno. Oh, Sovereign's liking the The styling. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, man. These things are style more than anything else. They got a lot of power, though, and they run like a banshee. So look at the pictures back behind me over here. Brenda's saying, how come there's a lot of videos of Mustangs, Camaros, and Hellcats crashing? Why do you think they crash? Is it because they're showing off or more things to do with it? Because you're idiots that don't know what they're doing behind the wheel of the car. The problem is that you've got guys that really have no business driving cars with these power to weight ratios. These cars are fast, but wrecking muscle cars and sports cars is nothing new. It's one of the reasons why a lot of guys started to move away from them back in the days. Insurance rates, they say they skyrocketed. The premiums were there, but the reality is that these cars are easy to get out from underneath you. So driver mod, practice, practice, practice. But the thing is that back in the day, we were getting turned loose to practice with cars with 250, 300 horsepower at the most. And 300 horsepower was considered quite a bit. Now, 300 horsepower doesn't even get you motivating in a minivan. So 450 horsepower being basically the norm for these modern pony cars, well, I mean, that was unheard of back in the day. And, you know, physics hasn't changed, and young and dumb guys and gals hasn't changed either. So you just amplify that by double, if not more than double. And now that's what you got with the cars that are running around. So it's just not knowing how to drive, quite honestly, and showing off and displaying your lack of skill set enthusiastically on video. I mean, it's just, you just see it more because it's accessible. This information is accessible and the knowledge is out there. So use it as a learning tool. Cody's saying Aussies sure need to lay off whatever they're doing. Those guys are nuts. They love doing burnouts. That's for sure. Blues in saying, how's it going tonight? B, going good, bro. Saying, quick question. Are you still running the Nitto R2s? Yes, I am. How many miles do you have on them? I'll probably pick up a set for the old 6.1. Man, I want to say that I've got somewhere near like 4,000 or 5,000 fairly hard miles on those tires. Lots of testing, and they're holding up fine. The only thing I don't like about them is, from a performance standpoint, y'all know about my thoughts on the aesthetics of those things. From a performance standpoint, they're just not as good as the Mickey Thompsons. But I will say this, for the weather that you're going to have up there in Canada, it's probably a better tire for you than the Mickey Thompsons. It's really more of a summer tire that just happens to hook fairly well. But they're good tires, and I like them. I mean, as a tire, from a performance, a stability, a handling, all of that, it does tire stuff really good. It just does it in a way that is a bit annoying if you've got a Challenger, especially because of the narrower wheel well that they have. Just get some rubbing. You got to get in there, and I had to adjust my adjustment when I switched over to the R2s versus the Nitto Tri-5, the regular Tri-5. My next set will not be a set of Nittos, by the way. Shane's checking in. Alabama, I like it. It's exciting to hear about a new engine being offered, but I hope my family and I are driving our 5.7 liter Hemi for years to come. Mopar means Mopower. That's right. Yeah, no, they'll be... Yeah, the parts will be available, and the Hemis are good engines, so. But we'll see how it works out. Ken's saying hopefully they will release all-wheel drive vehicles. Look at the GTR or the Gymkhana. Works great on unprep surfaces or when street tires ruin drag strip surfaces on a test and two night, for sure. Yeah, look, I'm on board with that too. I would love to see, frankly, guys, look, I would love to see a changing of the guard. I love the Challenger. It's iconic. The styling, timeless. because it's harkening back to an iconic image. The car's big. Frankly, it's huge. It's as big as a B-body Mopar. It's one of the things I love about my car is that it's basically like I got all the cars I ever wanted from Dodge in one car. That's why I'd never get rid of my Hellcat. It just does everything that every Roadrunner that I wanted would do. Every Challenger or Cuda that I wanted would ever do. It's comfy like a DeSoto. I mean, it does it literally. I mean, I've got my 56 Dodge. Anyway, long story short, it does everything that I would ever want a car to do. So that's great, provided you're of a certain age. But you can't keep giving kids their granddad's hot rod. They need something for themselves. And if that means an all-wheel drive inline six twin turbo that rips, well, sign me up. Sounds like a plan for a lot of fun. And, you know, if it's something that can help to bring this brand into a new, for a new generation. In other words, you're putting something together that will work moving forward, changing of the guard, handing over the baton, however you want to say it, whatever cliche you want to throw out there. If that's what it means, then great. But at least we're still talking about internal combustion engines, right? I mean, throughout this whole conversation, we're comparing this thing to, like a GTR, especially like an old school GTR, Supra, inline six type stuff. You can compare it to whatever you want, but at least we're not talking about EVs. And y'all know I love talking about EVs, but man, there's only so much you can say. Only so excited you can get, especially for something that's a one-trick pony. Don't know that I can really get all worked up over that. But you start talking about an all-wheel drive variant or some kind of a hot rod variant with this inline six, and the fact that it's going to be probably the darling of the aftermarket once it hits, oh boy, sign me up, right? Randy's responding to Brando. Very true on all points. Lots of horsepower, bad tires, bad decision making, all of it. Gary's saying, thanks, Pete. You got it, Gary. So I'm saying I've been learning to tune with HP tuners on my Mule 06 Magnum RT and have the engine tuned decent for my minor mods and cam. I want to start tuning the A580. Ship points will probably be the first thing you'll look at. Just a kind of a word to the wise, I prefer to run everything in percentages. So just think of it in percentages and you'll be good in terms of upshifting scheduling. Cody's asking, which is better, shorties or long tubes? It depends completely on how you're packaging the vehicle. Don't forget mid-length is in there too. But for a naturally, not talking about a positive displacement charger type of a scenario, only for naturally aspirated, if you've got a real wide lobe separation angle like the 6.4 has, there's not as much time, tick-tock time, for scavenging to take place. If you have a tighter lobe separation angle, valves are open for longer, overlap is what it's called. At the same time, you have more of an opportunity for scavenging to take place. Wide lobe seps don't offer that. So you'll get good torque response or some more torque response down low, which is what long tubes do. By the way, long tubes are just there to make torque down low. They don't really do anything or rarely do anything unless it's a poorly designed exhaust system for horsepower up top. You'll see that range really start to come together. In some cases, you'll see that the long tubes just won't make power past a certain RPM. It's because there's not enough time for scavenging. So, like I say, a lot of it depends on what you're doing. NA cars, typically they've got a tight lobe separation angle, you have to have long tubes. In fact, with the cams that I put together for the shops, I say you have to have long tube headers. Cooks, 1 7/8. Put them on the car. But because they need the scavenging to make, from the long tubes, to make the torque and to make up for the torque down low. The cam will take care of it up top, along with the scavenging effect that you get because of the tighter lobe separation angles. For positive displacement superchargers, it's kind of hard to justify long tubes, mainly because you have a belt-driven scavenger pump sitting right on top of that thing. It's called your supercharger. And the effective scavenging from that supercharger does start to take place at around, I think if I remember correctly, I'm just going to say 2 pounds of boost. It might have been less than that, but I know it's in effect at 2 pounds. And in fact, the number was significantly less than that. It was points anyway, at about 2 pounds of boost, which for a Root superchargers right now, you've got scavenging. And that's why for Root superchargers, every cam manufacturer that makes supercharged cams specifically make them for Root supercharger or positive displacement supercharger with very wide lobe separation angles. So you don't need long tube headers for that. And the reason why you do a wide lobe sep does 2 things. One, you have instant boost, and instant boost response. No less overlap means you have a quicker boost response and higher boost at low RPM levels. It also means, because of the wide LSA, you carry power way further out than you would with a very tight lobe separation angle, so it works well with that compressor type. It kind of sucks for other engine types because you lose all that torque. But anyway, hopefully that answers the question. Again, a lot of it has to do, if you're just talking about power production, packaging. You know, some cars, our cars, yeah, put a set of 1 7/8 Cooks on it, you're in good shape. Other cars, though, you got really tight turns coming out of the thing, and they're going to tell you that it's making more power, but the reality is that you probably could have got ahead with a set of shorties or mid-lengths and not had to suffer the penalty of just having a bad design on the long tubes. And again, that design is dictated by the space that you're putting them on the car, so it's packaging. It's not always better to have long tubes. Hell, Foxy doesn't have long tubes. Foxy's got some, like, what the hell is on that car? 1.5-inch shorties, stainless steel shorties, Ford Motorsport swap headers on it. And it does great. So, you know, again, it's all about the feel of the car, the sound of the car, all of that. They work, but I wouldn't say that it's always better. Anyway, I'm just kind of wearing that one out a little bit. So I was asking, with shift scheduling and torque management, et cetera, do you have any resources for that, or where to find info on settings? Check with the forums. There's guys that are in HP tuners. You've got some, I think they still may support it, the tune repository, but there's, go to the forums within HP tuners, and there's guys that can help you through that. That's a good resource. KDC saying, hey, Mason, with a 5.7 Pro Charger setup, are you able to counteract the lack of low and grunt by just running 373 or numerically higher gear? Yeah, a lot of guys did that. They'd run the 373s with those cars naturally aspirated, and you could run them as well with the blower. It'd actually be a really fun combination. The only downside is the cost of that gear. That gear is freaking expensive. Roy, thank you very much. Saying thanks for being on live chat. I learned a lot from you. Thumbs up. Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate the super chat. Really, I do. Thank you very, very much. Hopefully, I'm able to get you guys some info that helps you. I know a lot of this stuff is, I get a little bit nerdy and I can kind of over explain things. I'm not trying to, it's not like me trying to, flex brain cells over here. I mean, I'm trying to make sure that if I'm talking to you guys about this stuff, that I'm giving you terms that you may go back and go, what do you mean by that? Maybe look it up, or I'm not trying to give you homework or anything. It's just, talking about it from the point of view of somebody that's worked with this stuff, worked with customers, done camshaft development, some tuning stuff, just the little things that make car life a lot of fun. Brendo's asking, do I consider the Scat Pack a very fast car in your honest opinion? You've got to define very fast. If you're going off of my definition, no, but you've got to have about 1,200 horsepower before I start considering something very fast. And even then, that's subjective. I mean, granted, you're asking for a subjective opinion from a guy that's used to driving stuff with a whole lot of power, in some cases double the power of that Scat Pack. So I wouldn't phrase the question like that. I don't like how that question was phrased for me. I think for me, if the question is, do I consider the Scat Pack fast for the street, fun for the street, appropriately fast for the street? Hell yeah, I do. Because for everything you would presumably use the car for, it wins the argument and the race every time. We're not talking about roll racing here. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about that, because you can't win that race. No matter how fast you are, you're going to run into somebody faster. And in that game, let's just say that 1,400 horsepower is like the opening salvo for, horsepower versus power to weight ratio. It doesn't matter. 14 bills or you're going to get smoked. But for everybody else, the sane people, the people that aren't stupid like me, hell yeah, it's a fast car. It's a very fun car, and it's a car that is even better because you can use every horsepower that you paid for on the street all the time without any fear of hurting the car. See, the difference with the Scat Pack is value. You get a lot of car, a lot of horsepower, and a lot of value for the dollar that you're spending. Put a set of drag radials on the back of it. Could be 888s, could be the Nittos, could be the Mickey Thompsons, could be any of the dot legal stuff. And now all of a sudden you've got a car that on a decent patch of concrete, you can absolutely trounce people with that thing and run the car up to go straight to jail speeds in a very short order. What's not to love? The cars are fast in that respect. It's a true muscle car in that way. So I don't like the idea of calling them very fast. And none of them are really very fast because, again, fast and speed is 100% subjective. I've driven cars that had over 700 horsepower that didn't feel fast. They felt slow to me. They felt slower than my SRT did. And again, these are pro-charged 6.4s, some of them that we specifically made a couple of these things to make over 700 horsepower, but they never felt like 700 horsepower to the rear wheels. So the Scat Pack feels fast, feels punchy, feels fun, feels muscly, and that's what makes the car fun to drive. Anything else outside of that is going to start to become compromises, whether tire technology can't keep up with it. You're talking about parts failures potentially. Not talking about stock Hellcats, just talking about faster cars or modded versions of these naturally aspirated cars. They get too rowdy. I mean, the Scat Pack really does tick a lot of the boxes of being one of the perfect cars for the street. That's why they're so popular. The market would agree with everything that I'm saying, by the way, because of sales numbers being so strong with the Scat Pack 6.4 powered contraptions that are running around out there. So is it very fast? It's very fast in a lot of ways. And as long as you don't try to go outside of the recipe for what makes those cars great, you can have one that's fast, fun, does long, stupid, smoky burnouts for a lot of years to come. And that's really more important to me. Oh, Hemi's hanging out with Mike on the NGK Parts Finder. Yeah, sorry, man. I just cannot remember. I know the number. If I saw it, I would be able to pick it out. I think you might have been onto something with the 5, but I could have sworn it was a 6 that went in those cars. Give me Dad, say Professor B, on Wednesday, I traded my Scat for a 16 Cat M6 in Redline. Very nice. Drove it home in the rain. On summer tires, 9,000 miles on it, and seems to be like new condition. Anything I should look out for? Well, first, I got to tell you that my wife was the first person to drive my Hellcat home, and she drove it home in the rain also. So very cool. Asking if there's anything I should look out for. Cops. That'd be the only thing I'd be worried about with that thing. No, those cars, really good. It's got low mileage on it, but it should have enough miles on it to where you will be out of the issue with the superchargers. Late 2015, early 2016, Hellcats had issues with the snout bearing. There was just a bad batch of them. I know that Racer X's car had the issue. There were several that I had heard of, but only one person that I had a direct line of sight to. I believe you should have enough miles on it to where they failed usually before, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 miles. So I think you should be good. Check to see if it has had that TSB done to it already. If it hasn't, it's not that big of a deal. It's easy to do, but it's something just that, they could potentially be a problem, but I think, like I say, I think it's got enough miles on it to where you've already kind of gone outside of the mileage range that those things would typically fail at. But congratulations, man. It's really awesome. M6s are a lot of fun. I'm saying that wine is intoxicating for sure. Yeah, it is. It's very intoxicating. But congratulations. You're going to love that car. Cody's saying, gathering more info is deciding en route of going V8 or sticking to my turbo 4-cylinder routes. Yeah, I don't know. I like turbo 4s too, man. Literally my roots. My first car was a 600 turbo. And again, thank you, Roy. I appreciate that, bud, for that super chat. HU is asking about the Senti supercharger. With long tubes. Yeah, they'll offer more. So here's the thing. Ideally, this is how you put a combination together for a centrifugal supercharged car. You take engine, okay, camshaft that is, because the problem with centrifugal superchargers, you have to remember, is that they want to keep pushing peak power as far out to the right as they possibly can on that chart. So the idea is you put a cam in that thing that's advanced, tight lobe separation angle with a decent chunk of duration, especially on the exhaust side. And what that'll do is that'll bump up peak torque and torque down low, and the centrifugal supercharger will then yank that power further out on the big end. So in that case, yeah, you need absolutely to have long tube headers for that combination. If you're talking about one for like a 6.4 or a 5.7, a 5.7 is going to get a big bump in power just because you're getting rid of that log manifold. The 6.4, not so much. So from an outright power point of view, we know that the long tubes don't really help 6.4 a ton. And the cam itself in a 6.4, with it having such a wide lobe separation angle, it makes putting a centrifugal supercharger on it a bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest with you, because the car is going to be a little bit softer because lower timing, but it's going to want to put all the power way on the big end, but it's just going to be the steady grind, the steady climb with that thing just grinding up that hill, if you will, of making power, and just keep making power and power and power and power. And then you basically run out of RPM capabilities with that engine before you run out of camshaft or supercharger. So it depends on the combination, but if you're going to put a Senti on one of these cars, There are some decent cams out there. I like to see cams no more than about 114-degree lobe separation angle. It's kind of the sweet spot for a centrifugal supercharger on these cars. And then run it a little bit more advanced. Do an intake center line of about 107. You don't have to go crazy on duration. You know, something that your typical 220, 230 cam is going to be real happy with that combination, and it'll do good. But in that case, yeah, you'd want long tube headers so that you have the ability to make better power under partial throttle because you've got the cam in it. And then at lower RPMs and at cruise, that's really where it's going to help the most. So hopefully that helps you. Cody's asking, you stated the 5.7 was originally a truck engine. It was. So instead of a 6.4 manifold, would the truck 5.7 be just as efficient? Well, you have to remember that the original truck intake was not variable runner. But the truck intake's actually not bad. As a matter of fact, if you were to take that truck intake and flip it around backwards, it looks practically identical to an M156 intake manifold, the way the throttle body sits straight up. The truck manifold is actually not bad. It does need a little bit of cleanup, in my opinion, to really get the most out of it. But the truck 6.4 manifold is actually the best flowing out of all the Hemi intakes. So, and that has a lot to do with the snout shape. It's just really good. No bends or quirky things going on with it. But yeah, the truck in manifold's great. Works great in the truck. And for a car, though, you need a driver's side inlet. The truck is actually passenger side inlet, so it's a little bit different in that respect. Silver's saying hello. Ray, hey, Rift is in. What's up, man? Saying, hey, V, got the flex. I like it. Marco's saying, what should I do to my C7? I don't know. What do you want to do? I mean, I drive it, have fun with it. I don't know that I would really do a whole lot with that. I think that for me, the C7 is really good as it sits. I like it ergonomically. It's a great car, but I wouldn't go really nuts with it unless you just have about, I don't know, $6 or $7 grand burning a hole in your pocket. You want to put a cam and long tubes on it. Pick up some power with it that way, but that'd be about it. Frederick is saying, what is cooking? What's up, man? Oh, Ken797 saying in Sportsman, the 392 will do really well. And the Hellcats perform well in Pro Class. They are consistent and don't have mechanical issues. That's true. And that's awesome. It's, you know, what more can you say? It's one of the most, you know, from a drag racer's point of view, one of the highest compliments you can give is just the fact that the thing is consistent. It runs strong. It's consistent, and durability. I mean, that's the big key to this stuff, is the durability factor. And that goes kind of in lockstep. You know, we're talking about the T6, and we were talking about it. I know we've kind of gotten into the question and answer part of the show, but durability is going to be a key factor with all this, because the Hemis have proven themselves to be very durable. It's what we use for fleet trucks. Got like 22 or 24 of them in the region now, and you know, all of them have well over 100,000 miles on them. They keep trucking and keep running great. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, you know, will the new inline 6 be as durable? Maybe. But I can tell you guys this. The Hemi, the Hellcat, the 6.4s have all have proven themselves to be very durable cars. Rick saying, I see a lot of people making big power with the C6 Z06. Seems like a good platform to build on. It can be. I mean, all of them are about the same in terms of what you can get out of these things. You can pull a lot of power out of these cars. The big issue that you run into, again, so what I was just talking about, was durability with these things. The good thing is that the GM stuff seems to be fairly robust. Where I see problems is with the Mustangs. It's not that they won't make the power, and it's not that the transmission won't handle the power, or however you want to put it. It's just that the longevity of it making the power or handling the power in the case of the transmission, I mean, it's on stopwatch, brother. It ain't on sundial. That sucker is like, they wear out quick. And for everybody that I know of that has built a really fast Mustang, there have been hiccups and headaches along the way, whether it's a Whipple setup, Cinti turbos, it doesn't matter. And the big issue that I've seen, especially when you really start turning the wick up on these cars and running them at the drag strip, not necessarily roll racing per se, but from a drag strip point of view, that's really where the cars start to run into issues. And these guys will do whatever they can do to start lightening the car up, take as much load off of those drivetrain parts as possible. That's why every Mustang that I see at the drag strip looks like it just got back from a chop shop. There's just nothing left of the damn thing. And the reason why is because they're doing everything under the sun that they can do to try to make the car lighter so that it goes faster, but more importantly, to take as much load off of that transmission, rear end, and everything else that's downstream of that engine. So it's just kind of one of those things. But the GMs and the Dodges have proven themselves to be real durable in that respect. Boosted Hemi's in. Got the flex. Saying good evening, B. Good evening, Boosted. Cody saying was thinking of a 5.7 Charger with a 309 diff. Make sure it's limited slip. 6.4 manifold intake and full exhaust with shorties with a tune. Of course, sounds like a fun car. It'd be a lot of fun. Just do a 6.4 exhaust swap and you'll be in good shape. Oh, Cody saying another thing that's been pulling at my heartstrings, the LS Fest here in Vegas. Reason for also wanting a Silverado for the L99 Camaros. Man, I mean, y'all know the story. I mean, I came like this close to doing an LS truck build. I had the truck picked out. It was basically going to be a stroker 6-liter, 4L80 combination type of setup, twin turbo. Basically, you're running the mill 850 to 950 to the wheel type of a combination. And then I was going to hit it with a 250 shot. And that was, going to basically put it about 1,100 horsepower to the rear wheels. And, just get out there and just have a ball with the thing. And I'm not saying I would never do that, but that's something, because I like trucks. I like the fast truck idea, but that's what I was going to do. I was also looking at the Ford trucks. I love the Ford truck. I love the way that they look. And so with the Coyote and all the, the Whipple option built trans, the whole nine. Problem is you start snapping parts, man, and they're not any fun when they're broken. And, I've kind of been there and done that with the big horsepower builds. Believe me when I tell you, it's a lot more satisfying to watch and want than it is to own and to deal with those things. It's a freaking nightmare, if I'm being honest. So, yeah, I thought about it. I had the combination put together in my head. I had to put a cam together for, I basically had mapped out that truck, and it was going to be really good. And just thought better of it and was like, it isn't fun. At that point, they really are not any fun. Doing long smoky burnouts at 130 miles an hour sounds neat, but it's not neat when it does it when you don't want it to. Brando's asking, how come the Hellcat has a smaller engine than the Scat Pack? Shouldn't the size be in the Cat be bigger since the trim is higher? No, because it's boosted. A lot of that has to do with boost response. So quick trivia on the Hellcat engine, it was derived from the 6.4. In fact, somebody's got that mule engine somewhere. I remember reading about it, but it was originally derived off of the 6.4. And the idea is, well, it's all in boost response. The smaller engine being 6.2, which isn't really that much smaller. The 6.4 and the 6.2 share the same bore. It's just that the 6.4 has a slightly longer stroke. The 6.2 utilizes the same stroke as the 5.7 or the 6.1. Part of it has to do with boost response, though, and the fact that you can run more boost and have lower discharge temperatures with a smaller engine in some cases than with the larger. And in this case, that's the way that it ended up working out. Matter of fact, the 6.2, or rather the 6.4, basically it would have worked out like this. You'd have been able to have a little bit less boost. You'd probably have a lower discharge temp, but I don't know if it'd be by that much, but it wouldn't have the boost response. So you would have to get to the same power level, you would have to boost up and spool up the blower to really get to the power numbers that they were looking at. That's just kind of the way it works. It's almost counterintuitive especially with positive displacement. You can have a smaller engine with the same pulley ratio have better boost response down low, and it snaps a little bit better. When you get into the throttle, it just hits a little bit harder because it's a smaller cylinder to fill with the same rotation of the blower. So when you put the supercharger together, you have a specific amount of RPM in mind and a specific amount of boost in mind that you can run. The IHI supercharger that's on the car, and believe me, these engines are built around that supercharger. That 6.2 is, I think I did the calculation on it, back mathed into a 6.4, and it's only like a 400 or something like that horsepower engine. But the way that it works is that supercharger technically is only rated to about a 10% above what its current RPM is at, which is like 14,500. If you had more displacement, the car would actually be a little bit sluggish because they would not be able to change the pulley ratio. See what I'm getting at? So you would have less boost. And in this case, less boost would mean that's kind of how this works out. Now, the trade-off there is going to be a little bit higher downstream, but that's what the intercooler is for, so you're not too worried about that. And low-speed spark knock can potentially be an issue, so fuel quality can be a bit more problematic with the smaller displacement down low for low-speed spark knock. But all that being the same, it's better to have the 6.2 than it is the 6.4 with that particular supercharger sitting on top. Now, if you go with a more efficient or a larger or a combination of the two attributes on a 6.4 or a 7.2 or whatever size the engine is, then it would be an appropriately sized supercharger for that displacement. So hopefully that answers the question. It's kind of a weird thing. I know that it kind of does seem to be a bit counterintuitive, but when you start to look at the supercharger itself, how the engine is built to take advantage of the attributes of that particular size of supercharger and the discharge rate and just basically everything about the supercharger. I don't want to nerd out too hard on you, but that's why it's 6.2 instead of 6.4. Cody's saying the 5.0 F-150s are crazy for sure. For sure they are. Yeah, they're good looking. I like them a lot, but well, guys, we're coming up on an hour and a half. I got to get to work back here. So I got to wrap it up, but I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me. Love each and every one of y'all. Would not do it without you. Get out there and do something cool for somebody. Chances are they need it more than you know. Ray, miss, and love you, brother. And with that, got to wrap it up. Y'all have a great one. We will catch y'all on the next one. Adios.